Yeah, thank you all for being here. Full room. My name is Omasta. I'm the Strategic Impact Manager with Great Outdoors Colorado, and really excited to facilitate a conversation with our amazing speakers here who are doing such great work around restoration in Colorado. I'll go ahead and let our panelists introduce themselves in just a minute, but I just wanted to kind of set the stage for the conversation today and just talk about, over the next 90 minutes, this theme of expanding conservation and managing for restoration and really resiliency and risk in the watersheds and in the system. So I have a series of questions that I'm going to go ahead and ask them, but really this is intended to be a discussion and a conversation throughout our time here. So before I jump into that, though, come on in. Can I get a show of hands? Whose organizations have been doing kind of restoration work or additive conservation work in Colorado here? Awesome. Who have been doing it for more than 10 years? Just a few hands. And who here are maybe newer, 2 years or less, or work for an organization that is just kind of starting to think about this? Yeah. Nice. Well, that helps us, and I think, we're always learning in this field, and we're excited to have a conversation today. So I'm going to set the stage and then hand it over to these great folks. So we've heard a lot about restoration and additive conservation here in Colorado, especially over the recent years. The Conserving Colorado Roadmap that you all helped develop with Keep It Colorado specifically calls out climate resilient landscapes and resilient agriculture and identifies community-led stewardship as a prime example of ways to get people out into nature, out into the watersheds and reconnecting with land. We continue to hear it throughout the day today. Representative Malesko really kicked it off with climate adaptation, what we're talking about today. The polling that we did, water came up as a primary focus, as well as beavers, of course. And then really, I think we were grounded in this conversation with the presentation that Travis and Regina gave about the work going on with traditional harvest and the restoration of Menkes. So there's a lot happening in this space. We see it in the grant funding world as well. So the Restore Colorado program, which is administered by our partners at National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We've seen significant demand for restoration led by land trusts. So in the last 5 years, a quarter of those projects, 16 projects, were funded to the tune of over $4.5 million across 8 different land trusts in Colorado. That number goes up when you start including our other conservation partners at county open space departments. So we're in the $7 to $8 million range. So there's a lot of investment happening in Colorado in this space just through that one program. There's obviously more. So we decided that it was like a great opportunity, as this is a growing field among land trusts and folks are getting interested, and Colorado's outdoor strategy has launched with similar pillars, to bring folks together and start a conversation. And this conversation will happen today and hopefully continue on beyond the walls. So with that, we're going to go into some introductions. I've talked enough. I'm going to let the experts here really kick it off. So, Kathleen, start.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathleen Voight. I'm the Senior Additive Conservation Manager of the Agricultural Land Trust. We are a statewide land trust largely focused on agricultural and working lands conservation. Across the state, this is a map showing different land ownerships, but across the state we have about 850,000 acres of easements, mostly agricultural focus. In northwestern Colorado, we have sort of a bit of a broader focus. Our additive conservation program was started about 5 years ago with a goal of supporting ongoing ag operations and conservation values on our easements. So we'll be diving a bit more into that as we go.
Thanks.
Great. Hey, folks. My name's Dirk Rasmussen. I'm our Senior Restoration Program Manager at Colorado Open Lands. I've been with the org for about 5 years. I'm based in Buena Vista. Folks who aren't familiar with COL, we're also a statewide land trust. We've got conservation easements all over the state. I don't know if we have quite that many acres, but it's 600,000-700,000. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. We started kind of dabbling with restoration projects kind of in the late 20aughts. Currently, we've got projects all over the state. Those yellow blobs on the map are kind of our headwater, stream, and wetland restoration focal areas. That green blob on the bottom is some kind of dryland restoration that we can chat more about in the San Luis Valley. And then those blue areas are areas we're kind of actively doing some restoration assessments to see what opportunities we might have. All of this grew out of a desire to kind of go beyond conservation easements initially, and how can we support landowners. That grew into support for land managers as well. We work on restoration of state and federal lands as well. So we can look at some of that. Glad to be here and hope to have a good conversation today.
Yeah, hi, thanks. My name's David Varner, and I work at Colorado West Land Trust. We're not a statewide land trust. We're in Western Colorado. We're based in Grand Junction, and we have an office in Montrose right now. And yeah, you can go to that. Yeah, and we have our land trust started as an agricultural land trust, and over the decades has grown to include conserving other things such as rangelands, wildlife habitat, open space, some urban or semi-urban planning type easements. We've gotten into conserving properties, though, that deliver a lot of ecosystem services. And the path to restoration work and this additive conservation work came out of stewardship. It came out of helping landowners deal with a weed issue in their agricultural property or something like that. But then grew in the let's say in the last 5 years or 6 years, we got started doing a little bit like more involved ecological restoration work. We sponsored a community group to do volunteer stewardship of some of our one of our conserved properties near Grand Junction. And then we got involved with a National Fish and Wildlife funded project that on one of our conserved lands. And that's when they hired me to be a restoration ecologist. And so that was kind of the path of our land trust towards this type of work. So my path I come from an ecological restoration background, so done ecological consulting and things. The opportunity to do this work on land that's permanently conserved was really attractive to me, and that's why I came into this world and into this work. So I think let's see. I put up, if you go back one, Dan, this is kind of our map until this year. It's the map of the area where we have conservation easements. The easements are in red, so you can see they're sort of clustered in certain areas. This year, we've created a restoration plan to try and organize the way we're approaching this work. And so that's what the next map represents a little bit, just dividing our territory into ecologically significant units. Maybe I've got a handout that I'd be happy to share that if you want to look at this closer. But this kind of shows the transitions or some of the changes we've needed to make as we do more ecological restoration work. And we want to be more systematic about that, our approach to that work.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Yeah, so much gratitude for these folks joining us today. I'm really excited for the conversation here. But before we dive too far into the what or the actual projects on the ground, we wanted to take a few steps back and start with why. because it's gonna be different for every region and every land trust as to why you might be engaging in this space. So we started with some BDA, PDA.
Nice, Dan. He didn't tell us he was gonna say that.
So, wow. Can you all take a few minutes and just talk about why your organizations are engaged in this work, and Kathleen, maybe you can start.
Excuse me. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most interesting questions about working with the land trust and working on conservation easements is this question of perpetuity, and perpetuity being a really long time really raises this question of what does the future of all of our work in this state look like, especially if there is a future where we have this perpetual obligation, and at one point there may be no more conservation easements to do if all of the land is developed or protected. What do we do then? So our additive conservation program, as I think is true to some degree for all of us, rose out of a question of how do we maintain relevance and how do we continue to honor and uphold our commitments to our landowners and to these properties. So within our additive conservation program, we're focused on how can we continue to be good partners to those landowners, continue to fulfill our mission, working on our already conserved properties. So most of our additive conservation work happens on our easements, looking at how can we support ongoing agricultural viability. So our land trust was founded by members of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association, really focused on maintaining and conserving a land base to support ongoing agricultural production in Colorado. So how can we be good partners in economy and climate that's increasingly challenging for ranchers, and support ongoing viability, resilience of those operations, and also continue to invest in the conservation values we're trying to protect. So that's our background for getting this program going. As I'll just pause right there.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, I think, for Colorado open lands. Certainly, there's the question of relevancy. You spoke to this idea of land being either protected or developed, and that's, I think, generally happening. We don't know when that sort of end will come, but it is restoration is a way for us to sort of remain relevant and kind of go beyond that initial easement. And a lot of these communities that we're working in, we've worked in for a really long time. We have not only relationships with the landowners, but public lands managers, county commissioners, other community members. So finding ways that we can kind of honor those conservation values and promote those ecological benefits through long-term restoration that have impacts beyond an individual person's property, something that we're really interested in. So in a place like Park County, where we've been working in the upper South Platte for the better part of 40 years, we're really starting to see the constellation of those benefits take form. We can jump around.
Yeah, those are great, and I think none of these are exclusive, right? Our land trust, some of those are the same reasons. One thing to add on to that is, I think maybe two things. One is that I mentioned how our land trust got involved in additive conservation work as a result of kind of just doing more stewardship work, and I think that's very real. Our landowners, a lot of the landowners are either agriculturalists or they are interested in wildlife habitat. They are very proud of the stewardship of their land for the past, decades and maybe even generations. And the conservation easement that their parents put on it or they put on it is one more thing that they're doing to protect that land. And so to make wildlife habitat even better, or removed old fences from the landscape, or induce meandering in a stream, is really right in line with that. It's taking care of the property that they've owned and stewarded over the generations. So I think that's important. There's a through line there, I guess. And then the other point I think is one of the reasons is as our culture changes, there's more people involved, more people interested in getting involved in natural resource conservation efforts. And some people are coming to the Land Trust because they've heard that we do restoration, ecological restoration work, and they want to find out if they can do a conservation easement so they can be a part of that work too. And that's really exciting. I mean, it's not the majority of the people of the work we're doing, but that is an element, and I have a feeling it'll be more so in the future. So.
I think that's a good point. We're seeing that sort of synergy as well between stewardship, restoration, and conservation, where, landowner might be coming to us interested in restoration, and then they learn about a conservation easement. So those programs can kind of drive synergy. I would also add to the list of why just the emerging for this work. Issues are fundamentally different for some pieces of property, in 2026 than maybe when they completed that easement, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So there's an emerging need, I would say.
That's a good point. You could take like wildfire mitigation as an example, I think, where people weren't really concerned about that 40 years ago the way that we are now.
It speaks to the cultural piece you're describing too.
Yeah, that's true. And in a lot of the easements, it says like no forestry activities or commercial forestry activity or something. And times have changed. Like there are places where it makes sense to do some thinning to protect the forest as a whole. And
disturbance isn't always the boogeyman.
Right. Yeah. So
I think one more thing we're thinking about in the development of our additive conservation program is how can we support the next generation on the property, recognizing that easement was this one-time tool that allowed an investment and an influx of resources into the property. But now that the next generation, we've been in easements for over 30 years, oftentimes the next generation has taken over or the land has been sold to the next landowner, and they're bound to those restrictions of the easement. So some of their hands are tied in terms of some of the means they have for economic activity. But how can we, one part of our additive conservation program is supporting landowners' involvement in payment for ecosystem services. So how can we help to support these other economic opportunities or revenue streams for the next generation?
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for diving in there. And, again, I think it really differs across the organization and the community, but definitely some through lines there. Across the different organizations. And you all started to kind of touch on this, but kind of diving into how, I don't have a joke for you on this one. Okay. But if you all could take maybe just a few minutes, just describing, with that why in mind, how you've integrated restoration and additive conservation into the organization, perhaps across teams, or how your staff capacity looks, or just how generally it shows up.
Sure. Organizationally, we call it our Restoration and Resiliency program is the name of the program, and it's under the conservation program, which is also stewardship and land protection. So we meet essentially we meet as a team once a month, formally, like in the same building, in the same office, but we interact weekly at least, all the time. There has been, I'm 5 years into this job, and when I started doing this work, I also did some monitoring work, some of that stewardship work. And now I don't have time to do that stewardship work. Essentially, we're doing so much ecological restoration work that my time is fully occupied. And in a way, I guess I'm bringing this up because doing the monitoring was a great way for me to get to know a lot of different properties and see what resources are out there that might be worthy of protection or restoration. And now I'm not able to do that. So we're sort of we need to rebalance that a little bit, but just roughly. That's how we're organized. Sorry, I don't want to take all the time, but we're just getting to a point where we're kind of ready to hire someone else to do some more of this ecological restoration work. And so the structure is very fluid and we're changing it every year as we grow. I think, I don't think like the structure we use is necessarily the right way or anything, but we've learned a few things along the way. So that's the way we are. How about you all?
We've structured, so our restoration program is called Healthy Lands and Water, and it's housed within our stewardship department. So we have stewardship and conservation, so stewardship, monitoring theme and conservation is new acquisition. We're housed within that stewardship team. There's 4 of us currently. And one of the things that appealed to me about this position when I was hired 5 years ago, it was kind of a blank slate. So COL had been dabbling in stream restoration in Park County for the better part of a decade. It was a little bit all over the place. The mandate was kind of like, hey, build this program, which really appealed to me to kind of have that opportunity to build a team and kind of set the direction and the tone. So we've hired 2 additional people since then. One just recently with the support of GOCO and National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So thank you for that. I think one of the headlines for me is these very targeted bodies of work need the full attention of somebody if they're going to be successful longer term, or you're really going to grow these projects. So I think that was kind of an observation that we experienced early on is, this was not, it wasn't super effective for stream restoration to be somebody's side project, 10% of their job. It really demands someone's full attention if you want to see these projects flourish. And that takes time and fundraising and diligence. So it's, I don't say that lightly. I recognize there's some real capacity barriers there. But for us, that's been really, really important.
Our additive conservation program is housed within our conservation team, but distinct from both our stewardship and our transaction teams. And we've been really focused on how can we leverage additive conservation to make both of those other programs function better. So we're separate from the stewardship team, but try to use our additive conservation tools to support a lot of our stewardship issues. Some of that is proactive, so we provide funds. We have a small grants program I'll touch on as we go, but provide funds to our landowners, and oftentimes those will go towards water infrastructure, measuring flumes, things that help to maintain the legal integrity of our water rights to avoid future stewardship issues around those water rights, or looking at how we can use the resources to help to resolve existing issues. So looking at if we have funding available for a landowner, how we can use that as an incentive to resolve an existing issue with the easement that needs to be amended, by using that as sort of a carrot to initiate and get that sort of lingering issue resolved. For our transactions team, so our additive conservation work, a small portion of it happens off of our easements. We're a partner for the Colorado Soil Health Program, and through that we're working with members of the Colorado Cattlemen Association who didn't have easements. We're working on some fire recovery around the Lee and Elk fires in Rio Blanco, some of which was for properties without easements. And for that, we're looking at how can we build relationships with other landowners to support the pipeline, develop those partnerships so that people are interested in working with CCLT to enter into a conservation easement. And other times we're looking at how can we resolve issues for new easements, such as water infrastructure, that we want to address prior to the easement going into place. So trying to leverage our additive conservation program to support the other work that we're already doing and make that function better. Right now our team is just me, but we are hiring for an additive conservation staff person for Eastern Colorado based on the Front Range. If you know anybody who might be interested, please have them reach out.
Nice little job plug there.
Yeah.
So you all have kind of already mentioned, wildfire recovery, stream restoration, water rights. This space, there's a lot going on. And it seems like you could easily get pulled down one rabbit hole and then jump to the next. So can you speak a little bit to how you all select the projects that you work on? How you maybe avoid kind of that mission creep concern? And, are there any kind of, funding mechanisms or community resources or efforts you've leveraged or connected landowners to or what have you, kind of as part of that? The big long question, but maybe just start with just how you're selecting projects and identifying those opportunities.
I can start us. I think it's sort of an extension of the programmatic structure. One of the things that I tried to do early on as we were developing our program is really figure out what kind of our niche focus, target focus was going to be. There's, as Dan is saying, there's no shortage of projects out there. And we recognize with, limited capacity, limited funding, just generally limited resources, we weren't going to be specialists in everything. So it was really sussing out what are we good at? What can we connect? How can we support our profile of landowners and land managers? And for us, we've landed on kind of headwater, stream, and wetland restoration, and then this sort of dryland farm transition. Two very hyper-specific areas that Colorado Open Boats is focusing on. In terms of the question, the how.
Yeah, how you might connect or navigate, connecting interested landowner. Yeah.
So COL is working both on private conservation easements that we hold the easement on and public lands as well. So we're really filtering projects through some pretty specific ecosystem criteria. From the wetland side of things, these are, I think it's 2% of the land that, gets thrown out there. We provide ecosystem services and habitat for 80% of critters. So it's a relatively small portion of the land. So that kind of takes a big cut straight out of the gate for these headwater, stream, and wetland areas. Even beyond that, we're pretty focused on beaver mimicry restoration. So actually restoring the keystone species to these areas, full stop. So where are there historic beaver complexes on the landscape that have some sort of ecological impairment, some sort of process that maybe is lacking, that's limiting beaver occupation? And where are those sites in relationship to beaver colonies that we might have a reasonable expectation of recruiting that critter back onto the landscape without trapping and moving it? We're not moving critters for the most part. So for that body of work, that starts to yield a pretty small subset of sites. From there, we're working pretty heavily with a group of contractors that we've been building relationships with for 25 years. They help us kind of assess those sites. It's a very collaborative process. We're out making site assessments as a group, kind of creating these restoration prescriptions and really co-developing those projects to what funders like to hear is shovel ready. So kind of getting them to that point as a group and then funding those. On the dryland side, we're at a much earlier, more nebulous phase. It's unclear what the actual needs are. We've just hired an expert in this area. I'm a geologist by training, so it's like don't hire the geologist to grow grass. It's kind of a running joke, but I know enough to know that there's an opportunity here, and folks who know more about this than me can kind of follow this same pathway. But really, it's letting the ecology drive the process. What's the underlying ecological impairment? How can we address the root cause of that through treatments, adaptive management, so on and so forth?
That's refreshingly defined.
Okay, yeah.
Which is a segue into my my project selection criteria, which I'm describing the history of it more than anything, but it's really been about opportunities that walk in the door, landowners that are interested, collaborations, like I mentioned, like community-oriented restoration groups, volunteer groups, near Grand Junction, for instance. So those are, the lowest hanging fruit, I guess. And then collaboration opportunities have been really huge, like where there's an opportunity to collaborate with another organization that has a presence, like in a new geography and in an aligned geography, within our service area, or maybe their mission is aligned with what we're doing, this ecological restoration work. So that has been, an opportunity that's motivated us to develop projects when there is an opportunity to do a project with another organization that's interested in doing that same project. It's a way of like getting more work done too, right? When you can collaborate with another agency, another organization. And then the last, project selection criteria really has been when the restoration ecologist on staff identifies a resource that's worthy of protection and a viable sort of method of protecting it, and can lay out a project on how to develop the project and get it to shovel ready, and then get an outside funder to help fund getting that work done. That's been the past, and as I mentioned, we've just finished a restoration plan that is systematizing this a little bit more, and so we'll see how it goes. This summer will be a test case, and the next couple of years, so maybe I'll change my answer in a couple of years.
We're also doing random projects too, so don't.
You sounded like check mark.
Yeah.
It's a key.
I think we're somewhere in the middle of those two. We have some sort of high level guiding parameters, but are not super narrowly defined on those. We have two main avenues within our program. One is focused on supporting landowner involvement in payment for ecosystem service markets. That's the sort of more nascent part of our program, but looking at avoided grassland conversion, carbon projects that our landowners can get involved with. We're starting to explore wetland mitigation bank involvement, or looking at other sort of early stage credits that are developing. I think we'll see in those markets a lot of change in the coming years. But we want to, sort of stay on top of that and think about, how this opportunity really closely aligns with the work we're trying to do. The second avenue is more of the sort of restoration enhancement work. With that, we have three main priorities, which are water and irrigation infrastructure, grassland health, and forest health and fire mitigation. Which are intentionally broad, can apply to just about any operation or property or ecosystem in Colorado. But those are sort of our overall guiding principles here. Within that, for project selection, we are really interested in how can we find projects that are these win-win solutions between the agricultural operation and the conservation values. And I think overwhelmingly, a lot of projects can support both of those things. If we're supporting improved irrigation or improved grazing management, slowing water down, keeping more water on the land, all of those things support the ag operation, support forage production, the ag viability, while also enhancing the health of all of those ecosystems. But because we weigh both of those two pieces evenly, more so than maybe like Colorado open lands, for example, there are a lot of projects we probably wouldn't work on. Like, we often, depending on the landowner, but probably won't be trying to recruit beavers into an area where there's a lot of like irrigation ditches or
great flood irrigators, Kathleen.
Absolutely. But I think because we weigh those two pieces evenly, we recognize that a project, wetland restoration or something, anything that sort of impacts the land that's being used for production may not be a good fit with our landowners. So we're sensitive in sort of walking that line of what would be a good fit for the landscape, but also a good fit for the use and management and landowners on that property.
I would add as well, just within our department, kind of keeping a pulse on who are some of the other partners and orgs doing like forestry work, for example, and that's critical to integrating these with our wetland work. We're not doing that work. So connecting our landowners and land managers with folks who are doing that. So kind of being a switchboard beyond our individual projects is a big part of our strategy as well.
We say the same thing. I think the strength of our program is just in being matchmakers of understanding our landowner needs and also understanding the landscape of funding availability or other nonprofits or other experts who can provide that technical or financial assistance.
So you kind of talked about partnerships and those collaboration pieces, leveraging, outside expertise as well. Curious, can you touch a little bit more on the partnership aspect, finding the right partners for projects? Maybe you've said all there is to say about partnerships, but it's a term commonly thrown out there in this space, and partnerships really are important to the work that we do. But you can spend your whole time attending partner meetings, and how are you leveraging partnerships to get the work done in your space?
I can start. Partnership is absolutely critical to the collaborative nature of these these projects, especially if you're pursuing kind of an adaptive management long-term strategy to these. You need the partners. I'm a big advocate of partnering with intention. I think sometimes in the NGO industry we can do better about being really specific and targeted about how we're partnering versus just saying we're going to partner. So having a specific reason and having those conversations early and often upfront with partners. What is that partner bringing? Are they bringing money? Are they bringing expertise? Are they bringing a relationship? So just drilling in on that a little bit. I'm a big advocate of. I think certainly the relationships is a big one for us. Leveraging partnerships across jurisdictions, across boundaries, in these communities that we're working. Certainly partnering with, say, the U.S. Forest Service and a series of private landowners within a watershed amplifies the benefits of these projects. So there's any number of examples we could point to for that, but I would just start with the partnering with intention.
I think that's a really good point. It's the I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but for us, sometimes that intention is because there's strategic alignment, and really this is just an opportunity. This is an opportunity for multiple people to be working on the project instead of just me or just one entity. It's someone to be there when I'm not there is important, I think. And that's something when if I'm in Grand Junction and we have a 6-county area that we're working in, it's important for me to have partnerships with organizations, like-minded organizations in other parts of our service area. And so, I think that's, strategic alignment, geographic alignment. These are really important. I think. And actually, just to step back, the first partnership is generally the landowner. I mean, the landowner being able to see eye to eye, have a good conversation with the landowner is really important if you're going to be doing this work on their property. So that's really where it begins, and deserves a lot of honor and appreciation, I think, for them to engage in something that they don't need to do. It's all just voluntary, at least. Yeah, I mentioned that. All the work we do is landowners are just volunteering to be a part of it. So may not get anything tangible or, funding out of it or anything at all.
Absolutely. Those are both great points. I work out of our office in Steamboat Springs, which is a place which is really saturated by conservation, restoration, river health nonprofits. And I think our strength there has been finding our niche amidst that, very full nonprofit landscape, and also recognizing what our strength in those partnerships can be. I think to David's point, our strength is often is those relationships with private landowners. We're doing some work in northwestern Colorado with another nonprofit who has been doing restoration on the Forest Service land, and they've been really successful in that. We're really interested in doing the same work on the private side. So they're bringing sort of the expertise and the background doing that work. And our strength is landowners who trust us and would be willing to enter into a restoration project with us, who maybe wouldn't feel the same way about one of the many other nonprofits there. So just leaning into that value we can bring to the partnerships, and then how can we strategically align with partners who bring in those other values or skill sets we may be weaker in.
I could make a plug for partnerships with agencies as well. I mean, CPW has been a huge partner for us, and Colorado State Forest Service has been really good. They have the expertise to do some of the work that we don't necessarily have, and so they also are looking for partners who kind of know how they work. Like Colorado State Forest Service, they have grant programs to do wildfire mitigation work, but their grant programs are kind of quirky and hard to deal with sometimes. But as a land trust, I think as a go-between between a landowner and an agency like that, that's a role I play a lot. Is interpreting things for the landowner sometimes, like this is why this agency is requiring you to do this.
That's a good point.
And then also translating it into sort of out of agency speak.
Out of acronyms.
Yeah, out of acronyms, yeah. And being able to communicate more clearly with the landowners. That's been really important. And at the same time, we get a lot out of CPW, the relationship with CPW and Colorado State Forest Service. So, it's time well spent.
I think building the partnerships with funders as well is a big part of this. Partnering very strategically in terms of which funder maybe is paying for which part of the project, depending on their priorities, and kind of to your matchmaking comment of almost matchmaking with funders to some extent. So we've had some good success where maybe we're working in a place where the county government has money for boots on the ground work, and that's great. They also want to see the monitoring, which maybe Colorado Water Conservation Board is interested in, and maybe there's private money involved. So just kind of matchmaking with funders and communicating with funders about how that match works and who's bringing what to the table has been an important partnership for our program.
Personally, I've learned a lot from those partner gatherings that you all put on. Yes, this picture here actually is bringing a lot of funders to the table and talking about the project and how it all ties in and comes together. So the next series of slides is all going to be an opportunity to see what themes we're talking about, how those play out on the landscape. So you're going to see some actual projects where this takes hold. But before we transition to that, are there one or two burning questions that anyone has in the audience?
I'm curious, has this work opened up any new revenue channels for your organizations? And if so, kind of at what scale relative to your overall budget and funding mix?
I probably should prepare. I see some colleagues in the audience here. They might know more than me about this. But I think development is something, like if we are doing ecological restoration work, that is deserving of funding just from general membership. And there's opportunity there. I'm not sure how much we've taken advantage of it. But then for grant funding, we've been able to secure grant funding to pay for staff time and pay for work to get done on the ground, whether it's paying a contractor or whatever. So revenue through that, but pretty much it's, grant money in and money out. It's not like there's a lot you put any in the savings account there. So I'll think more about that. You guys have some answers.
I think also, grant funding for specific roles, like an additive conservation role, but also, overhead from individual grants projects we're working on is one piece. I think we've also our external relations fundraising team is really excited about sharing our additive conservation work, because I think our donors and supporters are really excited about just all the opportunities that that program comes with, supporting our existing landowners, having them be more involved in fundraising processes as they see sort of the benefits and work we're doing, that commitment we're maintaining to our landowners. So I think there has been increased support through our general fundraising development programs because of our additive conservation work. We've also entered into these sort of unique but partnerships with individual landowners or property managers where we're providing additional support, like helping those folks further too. We have an agreement with a couple of different easements we have that are all in one area. We're working on, and I'll talk a bit about this, like wildfire mitigation watershed planning project. And because we're providing additional support to those folks and grant applications and things like that, we're getting some like capacity payments from them. That's an avenue we're still working to further develop and flesh out. We don't have any sort of standardization for that yet, but I think as we look towards the future, we need to develop a system for, if we're applying to a grant on behalf of a landowner, we're managing a project, depending on the level of support, there would be different sort of capacity fees that would have to come with that just to cover our staff time.
Super helpful.
We're similar threads. I think it was a bit of a revelation, and I see the light bulb kind of going off for other orgs as well, that there is money out there to support direct staff time on these projects. That is kind of a new concept for some people who have worked in the grants world. So we're definitely funding our staff by making a direct project management ask, basically. So we write that in as a specific isolated task to these projects that is directly funded, that pays for my time and my colleagues' time. The squishier one that I would kind of consider more the new avenue is sort of this philanthropic channel. When we post a picture of a restoration on a social media outlet, we get engagement at an order of magnitude higher level than anything else we post. So that is directly translating to folks writing checks. So there's a lot of interest in this type of work. So
Thanks for the question. Yeah.
You talk about shovel-ready funding, and that's very evocative, like you're going to turn out the
I
next.
said that a little ironically, but yeah.
Okay, well, I have a specific question about
Sure.
that because it requires a commitment, a level of preparation that usually requires some money to get to that point.
Yeah.
And unless you are very different from other nonprofit organizations, you don't have a pool of money just to devote to assessment, design, permitting, partnership, the list goes on to be shovel ready.
Sure.
There's that. And then a question, and then I have a question about match funding. You get to that point, and oftentimes the funder requires that you pony up 50% or whatever. And so how do you overcome those hurdles?
Yeah, those are both good questions. The first one, we are writing specific grants to new project development. So for example, I have a project that's looking at U.S. Forest Service sites within the Salida Ranger District in Chaffee County, to assess those project sites, develop a subset of those, and seek permitting, federal permitting. So I think that was a $40,000 or $50,000 grant to develop 6 sites over 3 years. So we're actually going to funders and asking for money to do that work, and that's been very well received. I recognize that's not possible everywhere. And in those cases, we're leaning into kind of philanthropic channels to fund some of that staff time. We are also leaning heavily into our contractor relationships. So we've worked with a number of contractors who have a level of trust and partnership with Colorado Open Lands, who are frankly willing to do some of that early work pro bono, knowing that there's a high likelihood of future work for their company. So we're kind of combining that aspect of this as well. And then remind me of your second.
Oh, just, how you come up with a match.
Oh, match, yes. So
Well, preparatory work
Yeah,
constitutes a match, right? Like you can sort of go backward in time and say,
typically not, actually.
No.
Yeah, so typically not, unfortunately. Sometimes they'll let you count that as in kind, but usually the work has to happen after the contract has been
Yeah,
signed.
true.
So,
true.
and this gets into kind of grantsmanship strategy, but you know, I think about these projects kind of as modules almost. And when I'm structuring them, I try to structure them in a way that, you know, let's say I'm going to go after funding from a county, maybe a state agency, and, you know, like a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. I'm going to try to sort of craft the proposal that if one piece doesn't come through, it could either be removed or scaled proportionally. But ultimately, we're setting these up in a way that we expect a kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down within a relatively, you know, 3, 4, 5 month period. So we know kind of where we're at. That's tricky. It's tricky business. So I don't have a concrete answer for you there. But.
Just real quick to your question about can you count prior work done, I have seen a little more flexibility around that recently, especially around Colorado Water Conservation Board grants. They're allowing, match from 9 months prior, or up to 9 months prior to be used, and also seeing flexibility around like fuels mitigation work that's being done in the same area can be used as match for like watershed resilience in-stream projects. So I think there is some recognition from funders that there's more flexibility needed there, just like space to be creative in matchmaking there.
Yeah.
CWCB is a great example of an org that's recognizing the need for that flexibility.
Yeah, and I think with our organization, we've struggled with this as well. I think maximizing landowner in-kind work that they can do as match is important. You know, they're out there every day sometimes. And they may not be working on the stream restoration project per se, but part of their day it does have to do with some fencing or anything like that. There's some estimates that can be made. So stewardship work we're able to use as a sometimes. So if you're out there monitoring, if you're getting eyes on the property, you're checking the status of a project at the same time. So that's an opportunity to use. It's for all land trusts, to use that as a match. But it is a challenge. And I think it's really important. I think you said it well, where it has to be someone's focus has to be on the stream restoration project. You can't have that'd be a side job. I mean, you can have multiple. You can be doing multiple stream restoration projects or something, but it's hard to do stewardship and this and fundraising, and so getting the project to shovel ready stage and doing that project development work, it does take time, and it's staff time. I mean, I spend a lot of my time doing that, and some lead nowhere, right? You develop a project and it doesn't get funded, or the landowner sells the property or something like that. And so that's I guess for us, that is our general fund paying to do that work. And I can understand for a small organization, that's hard to do. We did start small and started with small projects that were community and volunteer driven. And I think that is a way to start building your reputation so that you're in a place where you can do what Dirk's doing, where, he's getting funding to do project development. You didn't mention this, but it must have to do with your reputation for being able to achieve results, right?
Yeah, I think it speaks to those partnership relationships. I think funders are, to an extent, signing up because I can take them to 15 other projects and they can kind of look at those. And that took us 25 years. So
it does take a while.
Yeah. So
I mean, what a great place that could be, right? If you have funders coming to you looking to where can we do this work, and you have a good idea of where all your conserved properties are and what resources they have. are on this.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Great questions. All right, so we're gonna move into this next phase, which is kind of seeing how this all hits the ground. Dirk, you're first.
Actually, to talk about beavers now. Okay, I'm going to talk about two arms of our Healthy Lands and Water program. First is Riparian Reconnect, which we're probably what we're best known for. And I would describe this as sort of a coalition of conservationists, landowners, land managers, community members, researchers, who kind of have a shared ethos, shared philosophy of what these types of headwater ecosystems can look like. This work, no joke, grew out of 20 plus years of work before I arrived on the scene. So credit is due to many people before I have arrived at stage. But it grew out of more traditional, what I would call kind of engineered form-based restoration, which certainly has its time and place, but where we were trying to implement that in the upper South Platte, we just weren't seeing the ecological results that we were trying to achieve. And the folks who were working on those projects had the wherewithal and humility to say, maybe we should try something different. What are we missing here? And we've really landed on this sort of beaver mimicry style of restoration, where the express goal is bringing beavers back into their historic habitat for them to be the stewards of the habitat. Full stop. We are trying to kind of reimagine these areas as messy systems. People have some preconceptions of what a healthy stream looks like, and that can look very different in different places. I promised Dan I would walk through these quickly. So this is an aerial image of our sites in Western Park County, and you can kind of see the main channel here. What you don't, I'm going to look at this one because I can actually see it. What you can't tell from this image is how much incision there is. So there's places where you have, 1.5 meters, 2 meters of incision, disconnected channel from the floodplain. The stream actually goes subsurface in places here. You can see those kind of light gray areas. So this is kind of the pre-restoration condition. So this is June 2022. This is about 6 weeks later. And you can see our individual structures in here. So there's these little kind of beaver dam analogs, post-assisted log structures, whatever you want to call them. We're basically just trying to mimic what beavers do. Slow the water down, spread that water out, allow the time for these processes to renormalize. So this is pretty cute. This is kind of our best effort to mimic what beavers can do. And the following slide is how we found it the following fall. So beavers have fully recolonized this system and are active at the site. I think best estimates now, there's 3 full lodges. So I just offer this as an example of kind of what this style of restoration can look like. This isn't appropriate everywhere. This isn't possible everywhere. I recognize that. But if you're selecting areas where the conditions are such that you might cultivate a situation like this, the results can be pretty profound. And we have a number of projects like this around the state, and you start to have kind of these constellations of restored headwater areas that the impacts are being noticed in the community downstream. This site in particular is on U.S. Forest Service lands. We have a number of conservation easements directly downstream of this site where there's been work done over the years. They haven't necessarily seen full beaver recolonization, but they recognize that they're getting water later in the year. They are seeing improvements to water quality. They're seeing more wildlife. So these systems are connected, of course, that, but it's fun to kind of recognize them in this way. So what do I have next? Oh yeah, so this is our other kind of emerging arm of our work that's focused largely in the San Luis Valley. So San Luis Valley, kind of south central Colorado, of course, a lot of center pivot, groundwater fed croplands. For a number of reasons, there's large tracts of irrigated farmlands that are currently coming out of production or will be forced out of production in the next 5 years, 2031. It's kind of a hard deadline. Basically, the aquifer is being overdrawn. It's not recharging fast enough relative to the withdrawals. And there's a need to sort of fallow some of these fields, or at least radically reduce the amount of irrigation water that's being used, to the tune of, by some estimates, 100,000 acres of irrigated farmlands are coming out of production in the next 5 years, thousands of acres a year. And the question becomes, like, what happens to these places? If you drive around the valley, is anyone from the valley that spent time down there? So you see these places that, water comes off and they're highly modified systems, and they tend to be very sandy. They grow a lot of weeds at best. They create a lot of blowing sediment that creates all sorts of issues. So there's this sort of opportunity of, how can we work with landowners and incentivize them to make reductions, support them to revegetate these systems before the water is shut off? So we're working on a number of kind of large scale projects. The biggest one down here is about 2,200 acre property that we're trying to do, like, basically commercial native revegetation. And it's really hard to do this sort of work at, in a bioregional setting that year, 6,000 to 8,000 feet with, in a good year, 6 or 7 inches of rain a year. So we've just hired someone for this with support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So my colleague Corinne will be kind of making this this project will have her full attention over the next few years. And the goal is to really leverage her position to be a shared capacity resource for other partners in the San Luis Valley, other land trusts, other conservation districts, water conservation districts, landowners, to really try to figure out some strategies to address this issue at this scale. So those are kind of the two areas I would. So I'll stop laughing.
You're next.
All right. Let's see. This picture is of a alpine headwaters area for the I guess it's West Creek, which goes into the Dolores River. It's at like 9,500 feet, and so I think what we're doing here, we had several years of work, and we're partners. We had partnership with CPW doing this work. They actually shared a crew with us one year that really helped us get a lot of work done. But I guess what it did really is it helped us achieve or work toward this goal of making our properties, our conserved properties, more resilient to environmental extremes. That's the goal of our restoration resiliency program. And what had happened, it was these are like alpine streams, and they had incised through a meadow. So this is a meadow that, like, our working theory is that there was no channel through this meadow. It was just when there was precipitation or snowmelt, it would just sheet flow through the vegetation. And from various impacts over the years, a channel had formed, and the theory is that channel was drying out the meadow. And you could see that in the vegetation with encroachment of drier plants into the meadow. So we set this goal of defining the meadow where we wanted to, essentially, it should be too wet for sagebrush to grow in here. And so we did that, and we worked with a contractor and CPW to lay out where we would put these structures, do the same work that Dirk was talking about grading the stream and making it so that it captures sediment that aggrades the stream and essentially fills those channels back in, so that the whole meadow is absorbing precipitation or snowmelt every year and holding it at higher altitudes. And then eventually, that water eventually will make its way downstream. The idea is that it will happen later in the year. So it'll be, it'll last longer into the summer, the runoff will, and it'll be cooler water. I'm hesitant to say there'll be more of it. That's, I think, maybe just what I want to say, but it's
Good to be skeptical.
yeah, but and that's not really for me. There are scientists that we can hire to do some of the monitoring here. We can't do it all at the Land Trust, we've discovered. And so we do work with some consultants that are doing research projects testing this, but it's such long term that, year to year changes that don't mean much. And so, so that's one example there. And then this, I think, let's see, I've been saying this is like a foot in the door technique, the fence work. This is where we work, at least in our conserved properties. Fencing is a major issue. It's expensive to put up new fence. A lot of the fencing that was put up like more than 50 years ago. It's so old. Where wildlife damages it, it continues to, the landowner has to repair it every year. The reason it's getting damaged is because it's not really wildlife friendly. And so we work with landowners to try and convert fences to be more wildlife friendly, remove some of the fencing, the derelict fencing, sometimes like all the wires down on the ground and just some of the posts are still up. So remove that from the landscape so it doesn't become an issue, get wrapped in antlers. I'm sure you've seen pictures of that. But I guess it's a foot in the door technique because this is something where I'm not really allowed to talk about beavers with certain landowners, and climate change is not really a term we use with certain landowners. But no matter what, there's no restrictions about fencing. Fencing is something that is like, there's a lot of people who live in Grand Junction who want to volunteer on a Saturday to remove it from public lands or from private lands. So, and there's a lot of landowners out there that need help with it because it's for one guy and his 2-person crew, it's a lot of work. But if you get 20 people out there, you can accomplish a lot. And so it's a great way to build a relationship with a landowner who maybe is skeptical. And so for me, it's a foot in the door. If I can do that, then maybe we can go talk about that stream channel next season. So I just would encourage, it seems like it's a low hanging fruit thing. If you have those types of easements in your land trust, I'd encourage getting involved with that. CPW is good at funding this kind of stuff. They have a habitat protection program that is like, they love fence projects. So you can help the landowner write those grant applications. The money goes straight. The CPW recognizes the landowner's effort as a match, so it can easily be leveraged here. Fencing and wildlife-friendly fencing has been great. CPW has a really good document that you can hand out to landowners, and CPW would love to provide you with a box of those.
I love that foot in the door.
Yeah. And maybe it's not the only one, it's just it's a good one.
Concept though. I mean, we see that like with some of our public lands projects, a landowner's like, what do you guys got going on over there? Like, can we do that over here? Absolutely. Yeah. Or vice versa. We've seen that with land managers. Yeah, private land, we do that in the forest.
Yeah. Oh, there's more.
There's more.
I was like, Kathleen's there. We mentioned, I mentioned this a little bit, but the process-based restoration, this is a type of restoration that's kind of gotten a lot of play and is popular right now. Really, it's kind of like, there's nothing that special about it, right? It's just using the sort of forces that are already happening out there, the snow melt and the precipitation events. That is in the form of water coming downstream. That's energy that can be harnessed. And when you build these structures in a stream and do it in a certain way, you can use that energy to bring sediment in and grade this meadow. This is an alpine meadow again, and we're working with Conservation Corps crews here, and it's our job to sort of get all these materials on site, and it takes a lot of work, but it's rock and wood. We're not bringing any like foreign materials into the landscape. We've played with that idea, and I've tried, using wire or screws to bind things together, and it hasn't worked out well. And just go back to just wood and rock and mud. Mud is the other thing, a lot of vegetation. This is a way of, I guess, one attractive thing about process-based restoration is it's human scale. It's also, you'll say low tech process-based. Low tech meaning there's no big machines involved necessarily. The penalties if you do it wrong are not terrible because it's just rock and wood and mud, and so the risk is low there, I guess. And then it's all, you can do it all with your hands or a wheelbarrow and a hand shovel. It's not maybe a couple chainsaws you need. There's not, it doesn't require big expensive machinery that costs $10,000 a day, or something like that, or $1,000. So yeah, thank you. That's good.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just going to talk a bit about a couple of different programs and projects we're working on. One thing I want to start with is that we have a whole spectrum of involvement with different projects. Sometimes we're just providing $5,000 or helping a landowner apply to a grant. Other times we're doing full project management. So we have sort of a different hand in different projects depending on the landowners, the capacity needed, the scale of the project. These first pictures are an example of a project we funded through our internal small grants program. It's called the Agricultural Resiliency Fund, and through that we raise money each year. Our hope is eventually to establish something more similar to an endowment that could kick off funds, so it's more sustainable, but we raise funds each year through corporate partnerships and private philanthropy, and then we redistribute those funds to our landowners. So we run a competitive process. It's a straightforward, low-lift application for our landowners where they put forth projects, and our board, our subcommittee, makes decisions on those projects. So we make these small grants of $5,000 to $10,000, not a huge amount of money, but oftentimes it's enough to get a project going, to catalyze it, or to help that landowner access other sources of funding, and provide that sort of match gap that we were describing. So these projects happen at all scales. Sometimes it's $3,000 for a new stock tank. Other times it's one small piece of a six-figure project that has a bunch of different partners, and we're just one small piece of that. Overwhelmingly, our demand for this fund is support for water infrastructure. This was a measuring plume that was replaced down in Saguache County. As I mentioned before, we're also trying to use this fund to avoid or mitigate future stewardship issues. So the previous plume was rusted out, in really poor shape, but helping that landowner to maintain the legal standing and integrity of their water right. This fund started 3 years ago. This might be its fourth annual year. We're distributing right now around $80,000 a year, so hoping to get that up to $100,000 in the coming years. But just one small piece, they're not huge amounts of money, but oftentimes they're really meaningful to those landowners. These are photos from another project we've been working on. I think we have Alex here who worked on this last summer, who's probably in that picture. This is also low-tech process-based restoration we're doing on some of our easements. This is all focused in Routt County. We're going out to our properties, some of which, due to historic grazing practices and poor management, have these really severe head cuts that you see in that picture on the left, where we see this really rapid erosion going on, and right upstream this really beautiful, healthy wet meadow habitat that we're trying to conserve. So we're doing this work in partnership with another local nonprofit I mentioned who's working on the Forest Service side a lot, and they've historically used volunteers, have this great network of folks who come out to partnership with them, with a local restoration consultant, with our landowners, and also have these great community events where we get people out on spectacular properties working together. This has been really exciting to work with volunteers. It isn't something we've done a lot before, but oftentimes we have landowners who come out and say, I want to come and work here because I want to learn how to go out and do this on my property. So we see that sort of scalability happening through those events. This one last thing on that last slide, this work is, when we talk about funding and match sources, this work is funded through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology because we're trying to protect sage grouse habitat upstream, and also through the Yampa River Fund, thinking about watershed, water quality benefits. So those are ways in which we could sort of tell different stories about these projects or emphasize different benefits to access different funding sources. So this is work we're doing throughout Routt County. We're also with that piloting a payment for ecosystem service model where we're providing direct payments to the landowners through a grant we have to compensate them for hosting these structures. So recognizing, we put in these structures, they help to preserve upstream habitat, improve downstream habitat. Hopefully, in however many years, the structures will be revegetated, we'll have collect sediment, recruited meadow vegetation will have disappeared, but we're providing that payment to the landowner to help to sort of catalyze interest and recognize the value of these lands in hosting those structures and grouse habitat, water quality benefits, etc. Slide. And then another big piece of what I'm working on has been a large scale, watershed scale wildfire planning project that's through the CWCB. It's their Wildfire Ready Action Plan. I'm in the wildfire panel tomorrow where we'll talk more about it, but we're trying to see, look at sort of a landscape scale, watershed scale of how we can improve wildfire resilience and also post-wildfire watershed resilience. So looking at debris flows, flooding events, things like that. Where are those risks and what can we do preventatively pre-fire? So this is a photo of the fuels treatment, mastication, Gamble Oak. We got a grant through the State Forest Service to do 80 acres of fuels treatments, and that happened across a couple of our contiguous easements right at the boundary between the Forest Service and the private land side. So this is work we're in the first couple of years of many years long process of looking at fire mitigation, watershed resilience sort of in tandem. This was a pre-fire project, but we've also worked on some post-fire recovery, especially on the Lee and Elk fires. Last August, we had a couple of acres that burned really severely, and through our Agricultural Resiliency Fund, our small grants program, we also raised funds to distribute specifically for wildfire recovery. So those are just a couple of things we're working on, all different scales, different levels of involvement, different focus areas on different natural resources.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing all those projects. I think it definitely highlights that there's different flavors of this kind of work, and you can see that to geographies and the landowner interests and the capacity of the land trust. I'm recognizing we have about 10 or 15 minutes here. And so definitely want to provide you all some time to ask some more questions. Kathleen, do you want to do like a quick?
Sure. Totally. Here's a map of the project area we're looking at for that Wildfire Ready Action Plan. So it's a 213,000 acre area we're looking at to identify projects for intervention for mitigating wildfire severity, but also those post-wildfire watershed impacts. So we've gone through this 1.5 year long planning process. We're interested in this area. It's right south of Steamboat because we have a significant concentration of our easements. So looking at, sort of broader cross-boundary watershed scale, landscape scale resilience. So these maps go through different types of analysis for hazard, hazard level for wildfire risk, and then also intersections of different values and how those intersect with wildfire hazards. We're just wrapping up this process at the end of a year and a half, and coming out of that are probably 100 priority projects. So this is just looking at Lower Walton Creek, one focus area where we have areas identified for high priorities for fuels treatments, stream like floodplain reconnection, in-stream projects, floodplain enhancement, wetland enhancement, all sorts of different things. In addition to, there are also a number of like great infrastructure, culvert, road crossing projects identified, but moving forward, we'll be focused on those sort of like nature-based solutions for improving watershed resilience.
Okay. So I have a quick question at the end for our panelists, but are there any folks who have any follow-up?
I wondered if any of you had any experience with hazardous waste materials and how to mitigate those kind of sites within near conservation easements.
I don't have a lot of experience, but just recently I did look into salvage yard as a junkyard. It's right on the bank of a river, and when the river flooded a couple of years ago, like it's like falling into the river. And so I looked into there's an organization that kind of helps other organizations and municipalities deal with brownfields, and I reached out to them and connected them with the conservation landowner that lives nearby, and they it seemed like a very good organization, and I can't remember the name of it, but maybe afterwards I can do a little searching on my phone and figure out the name and tell you about it. Yeah.
Kathleen made a little reference to this, but I'd be very curious to hear more about landowners seeing this restoration work being done, particularly wet meadow, wetland, riverscape restoration, and doing that independently without like land trust funding or technical assistance on their own properties. Like, what would it take to network out that independently across the private landscape?
For fear of being a little bit of an outlier or a skeptic on that question, I'm a little skeptical about that. I think there's a lot of hype around this type of work that you're describing right now. And I get about a call a month from landowners, watershed groups. Hey, can you teach us how to do LTPBR? Okay, what do you mean by that? Like, how much time do you have? Like, oh, can you teach us in 2 hours? It's like, no, they're dedicated restoration professionals who dedicated their whole career to this type of work. Now, does that mean we shouldn't use volunteers or encourage that sort of DIY mentality? Not necessarily, but I do think a certain degree of professionalism is needed to achieve the results that are being touted. Is what I would.
I don't think you're an outlier. I think a lot
I
of
would
folks
answer
in
that question.
LTPBR world
I
agree
think
with you.
as a community, we need to be really careful and skeptical about what we're promising with these projects. I think there's a lot of really big promises getting made right now around low-tech process-based restoration that are a bit absurd, in my opinion. So
No, I absolutely agree. I want to caveat that with saying our landowners who were at that event, who were interested in learning about it for their own property, we're also working with the same restoration consultant we were working with. They weren't just out on their own, like throwing rocks in, but trying to understand, like, what would it mean for their property? What does it look like? What's the sort of, what's involved in
what are
that?
your goals?
Totally. What
Yeah.
are your goals? So still working with professionals, because I agree. I think sometimes like LTPBR is a silver bullet.
I think there's a lot of sort of a priori assumptions right now that are being made about stream health. And the assumption that's being made is that streams are in size and we need to put stuff in them to fix it. And that may or may not be true. And best case, we help them out a little bit. Worst case, we're actually harming these systems. So there's a risk there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's smart to be skeptical a little on that. I've definitely run into eager landowners that are not that well informed, and I think there is a danger doing these things kind of wrong, and then it's kind of better to not do anything at all. At the same time, that's not everybody. That's just a certain sort of group of landowners, and there is the occasional landowner that has been able to, learn about this, kind of bring a blank slate to it, and not these preconceived notions. But I think it's important to note that this work, it takes training, and there are people who have dedicated careers to this, and it's important to get professional input on any of the plans, and then oversight when implementation is happening. It would take a lot of participation by a landowner for me to feel confident that they'd be fine to just go do it on their own. And most of our landowners are heavy equipment users, or a lot of them are, and they're some of the eager ones. So be careful, because you can do a lot of damage with heavy equipment too.
And I would say I've seen this in the public lands manager space as well. Stream biologist or whoever who's really gone about this, but doesn't necessarily have the training this type of restoration. So I just caution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I've also worked with landowners who, we've gotten to a place where they've engaged with us and beside us, and they've learned a lot, and they do have some knowledge after a couple of seasons of seeing what's going on, and structures and treatments are kind of in place, and they can help to sort of steward those on their property. So there's definitely an opportunity there. I'm just we can chat more. So
So recognizing the time, I've got one more quick question for you all, but before, just so much gratitude, Kathleen, Dirk, and David, for your time, all of you in this room taking the time here today. So we could give them a round of applause. Yeah, I don't know how we managed to pull all three of you out of the field for this busy time of year. So
we were
thank
all
you.
grumbling, oh, it's field season.
I'd love to end on just quickly, what is something that gives you hope in this field right now?
I
Don't all speak at once.
Yeah, there is hope. Drought has been top of mind, I think, for many of us. Absolutely historic low flows. I get questions from my friends and colleagues who, maybe are professionals in the space that's screamed to the dry. Some of them probably will. But I'm hopeful around a couple of places. There's a local creek near where I live in Buena Vista. It's a very dry area. Typically this time of year, it's flowing 15, 20 CFS. I monitor that site. It's flowing at about a quarter of a CFS right now, and it's supporting about 12 beavers. And the amount of water and wetness and vegetation those critters are able to provide in that space, in these conditions, is absolutely remarkable. And that's a hopeful data point for me. So.
For me, just as we talk about partnerships, seeing how many people are working on their own different piece of the puzzle, but working towards the same goal. We have an easement that's owned by the city of Steamboat Springs, where they're doing a massive wetland restoration project because they want to protect their water infrastructure downstream. So seeing how, there are these projects where people are coming from different angles, have all different motivations, but ultimately working towards very similar goals of, improved resilience and ecosystem functioning, and improved ag viability, and all these things intersect together. That we've found some unlikely partners. That gives me hope that we're all just moving in a good direction.
And those are great. They give me hope just hearing it. For me, this year right now, we have, so I didn't really talk too much about this, but capacity wise, we've been doing work, either me and volunteers or me and a contractor, that we got a concise, a discrete amount of money to pay a contractor to do a discrete amount of work or Conservation Corps crew that comes out for 2 weeks and pretty expensive. And so, but this year we've transitioned a little bit and we've actually hired a crew. We have a 4-person crew that's active from 2 weeks ago to the end of August. And that has given me a lot of flexibility in terms of planning. I can be able to move the crew around as needed. And they're AmeriCorps members who are learning, process-based restoration work and learning from a variety of people, not just me, but the people that know more than me. And they're going to be working in various different environments all summer long. And so I'm really excited at the end of the season, assuming they want to continue doing this work. That's for people that could be great for you all to hire this year. I mean, they'll have experience and they're really interested in what they're doing and they're working hard. And so that gives me hope.